the Making Chips was recording on the main stage.
Yep.
At like 10 or something. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go see those guys. And I go up there. I met Jim and Jason because I knew who they were. And I said, well, yeah, actually just flying in today to meet with this company called ProShop that I heard on your show. And I distinctly remember Jason going, oh, and like turn around, tapping you on the shoulder. You turn around like, this is Paul. I'm like, oh my gosh, I came here to meet you.
What's up, Mike?
How are you, buddy?
I'm doing super well.
Good.
We just had about 50, maybe 55 people in for a couple days on the team.
Oh my gosh.
Sort of a 2025 kickoff.
Very cool.
It was so much fun. I'm like,
yeah, you brought them all into Bellingham?
Yeah. To the hotel right across the parking lot, right on the water.
That's convenient.
It's so convenient. We got to get you up here, man.
I want to get up there. I was actually, as you know, I was just meeting with one of your customers about some other stuff, and we were talking. I'm gonna go ahead and drop my plug again that I want a executive level, like manager level user conference.
Yeah.
And they agreed. They're like, oh yeah, I mean, I would pay to go plus my travel, like just to be able to dig into ProShop at a manager, like executive level of what one button clicks.
Yeah.
Am I getting the data that's important to me that I don't even know is available? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we're doing a virtual one this year, but
good.
The in-person one is in the planning as well.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I know. So I know you love, like at IMTS, getting to do like your happy hour where you get to have so many clients in the room together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. And just imagine if we all traveled to you for a few days, you'd get us like isolated in the hotel across your parking lot.
I'd be living that high for months.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
So I had this realization just very recently that, with you and I coming on as new partners in Making Chips, we had sort of given our backgrounds and formally introduced ourselves to the audience, like back in like 2018 and 2019, respectively, or something like that. So, but we didn't actually do that recently after coming on board as partners. So I feel like we owe the audience just a little bit of the background if they're new to the show. Like who are these yahoos that are now, taking up my my podcast space?
Yeah. So, why am I listening to these guys?
Sure. So I think we should do that.
I agree.
And if you don't mind, I'll just go first. So,
sure.
And I'll tie it back into Making Chips, which some people may have heard. But so I went to school, a very hands-on sort of industrial engineering, kind of industrial technology program out here in Bellingham, Washington, called the Vehicle Research Institute. So I basically got to design and build cars for college, which is about the most fun thing I could ever imagine doing.
Sure.
And the shop that we had for our, up at school had a couple Haas's, had a Mazak lathe, had later on it had some DMG or a Morisiki, excuse me, well before DMG got involved, and manual mills, lathes, all that kind of stuff. And just we fell in love with machining, like me and the guys on the team. So we got heavily involved in Formula SAE cars. So as we all started getting closer to graduating, we decided that rather than scatter to the wind, we wanted to start a machine shop together. And the secret that some people know is that wasn't actually our end goal. Our end goal was actually to start a small niche car company. Okay. But we knew we didn't have the money to do that. So we figured we'd start a machine shop because we need all the same kind of equipment and people and processes. Because the car we wanted to design was totally like billet heavy, be like everything's made out of billet. So,
right.
So one of the guys took out a second mortgage on his house. We bought a Haas VF4 and rented a 2,000 square foot, warehouse bay in this, this building, and just started knocking on doors, trying to figure out how to make parts, make a living, probably went for a year without getting a single penny paycheck. Ate a lot of ramen. Thankfully, my girlfriend, now wife at the time, had a decent job and supported us. We lived in her parents' basement for 3 years. But eventually, the company started having some success and growing. So about 3 years in, we had about a dozen employees, and the Excel spreadsheets that my partner Kelsey had designed were getting a little long in the tooth. And we're like, we need some better software to run this machine shop. We were just a job shop, taking whatever came in the door. And as we started, we pulled down, I remember we had this shelf in the office with the whole Thomas register, the green books up on the shelf. And we pulled it down, opened the section to software, and started looking, what do you even call software that runs a company? Right. And we learned the term ERP and started getting demos of software and, all the usual suspects you'd imagine. And hold on, let's put this in reference. This is what years?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Started the shop in 97.
Okay. So you're now right around 2000 or so.
Yeah, it's 2000.
Yeah.
It is 2000. Maybe we started some research in 99. I don't remember. But it's right around that time. And, we were genuinely excited for them to come show us their software. We were like, this is going to be awesome. Software made for machine shops? Hell yeah.
Right.
And as they came in and started giving us demos, we're like, okay, show us how you manage cutting tools. Show us how you manage your fixtures, your first article inspections, all your work offsets. And they were like, what are you talking about?
Right.
The ERP doesn't do that. We were like, we were just so disappointed. And
the average solution cost what at the time?
Oh, I remember some of them were 100,000 plus.
Yeah. I was from my experience, and we'll get into that.
And
$100,000
as Kelsey describes it, he remembers talking to someone at Oracle, which is, I don't know why we would even talk to them, but they were like, yeah, it's $100,000 per CPU that you want to use. And if you need more than one CPU, it's double that amount. I'm like, what the hell? And they were, of course, all still paper-based.
Sure.
It's kind of electronic in the office, but as soon as you need to go make stuff, pin out the job traveler,
out and
figure out everything else, and
goes to.
And we had computers at every single machine with big 19-inch CRT monitors that weighed 70 pounds.
But that was a look.
The cream colored, plastic cases. And so we would pull up these spreadsheets, and we had, right at every machine. And to Kelsey's credit, these workbooks were fantastic for the day,
Sure.
There was a tab for the main part of the job traveler with what drawing rev it's at and the routing steps, and which machines it went to. And then on other tabs of the same workbook, we had a whole page for which cutting tools we're using. And we had the inspection plan and, your first article ones, and then your in process. And we'd put in 100 in process QC checks, right into Excel.
Right.
This was in 97, 98, 99, right? So we're already as paperless as we kind of could try to be. We still had drawings out there because that's just what we needed to do. But when all these software was nah, we don't, it's paper and we don't do any of this other stuff. We're like, well, not only can we not afford to buy these systems, but then we're still we're reverting to paper. Anyway, just after being super disappointed, we were like, oh, screw it. We just, we're going to find some developer and so she talked to Kelsey's uncle. He was a developer and he got us connected with actually his nephew. So Kelsey and Matt are kind of related by
marriage or whatever.
By marriage. He was in his early 20s, just, recently got out of developer school, and he was a web developer, which was kind of unheard of in the year 2000. Right?
Yeah,
because the internet was just barely happening. Speaking of dating ourselves when we were talking to Jen. So back in the
1900s.
Back in the 1900s. In the 20th century. So we got hooked up with him, and he just basically started replicating the spreadsheets that Kelsey built.
Giving you what you needed.
Yeah. And we very naively thought it would take him a year or two to replace the spreadsheets, and then we'd be good. we would just run off of that.
So people, like when I tell my story, people understand this, but did you start out like with a real database, or were you on Access or something at the first?
No, it was an object style database.
Okay.
Which was actually quite revolutionary at the time.
So you started out pretty scalable.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's still the same database architecture we use today.
Okay.
And Matt, to his credit, is just an incredible architect of like the data model and how it all works together. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm getting way in the weeds, but we started building the software and just kept wanting more modules and just kept asking. But in the meantime, we built this shop, for 17 years. Built this machine shop from one Haas to about 32 machines, 75 people running 3 shifts, sometimes 4 shifts.
It's a big shop.
It was a good sized shop, and mostly aerospace, mostly milling. We only had like 3 or 4 lathes, and all the rest were mills.
Right.
We had some big ones. We had some big routers and VF7 and several horizontals, several 5-axis. But our biggest machine shop customer a few years in asked us to sell it to them, the software. They saw it, like one of their guys came and worked for us for a few months or more and saw it. And Celthera Marine became our first software customer. And
I met them at IMTS.
Yeah, Rich. Yep. Yeah. Still a dear friend today and still using ProShop, 17 years later? Like, wow. It's like 2008-9 is when they got on ProShop. So in 2014, we sold the machine shop and 4 of us moved over to start this company. Me, Kelsey, Matt, and actually Matt's brother, who was a developer of ours. And so the rest, I guess they say, is history. The last 8 years we've, or now going on 9, I guess. Got like 100 folks, just over 100, I think. And many, many hundreds of shops, and I've gotten into podcasts and, machine shop mastery and interviewing shop owners that have had a lot of success and want to transfer their knowledge to on record so people can listen and learn. Newer shops. So anyway, and then got, heard of MakingChips, I think in 2017 or early, 2017. Was bugging Jim to get on the show, be a guest. I thought it would be good for the publicity to like have people learn about who we were, because at the time we had like maybe 10 customers. Got it on the show. Started, connected with him. He became a customer, which was awesome. And then apparently you heard that episode shortly after buying Hill. So you want to take the so. Paul, one of the things I've always loved about, like from the very first minute I met you, and we'll get there in a couple minutes, is like how opposite our careers have been. Right. So, opposite of you, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, went to the University of Tulsa. My dad was actually a professor at the University of Tulsa for management information systems. I had no idea what I wanted to really do for a living. Majored in management information systems because that's what I had been around for ever. So, came out of the University of Tulsa and with my brother started a software company. And our niche, as we called it at the time, I don't think it was an official niche, but it was our niche, was called shop floor data collection. So again, back in the 1900s, late 90s, internet's hitting. Large companies were making major investments in ERP systems, right? So the Oracles and the SAPs and all these massive systems. But as you pointed out in your journey, they were still paper-based once they hit the shop floor. And right.
And we had customers going, well, this doesn't make any sense. Let's hire somebody to come in and replace the paper.
Yeah.
So what our software company did at the time was go in. If we were walking into a new customer, we basically are walking the shop floor for, maybe 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. And anybody holding a piece of paper, we were like, what are you doing with that? Where are you getting the data and where's it going?
That's such a smart way to do it.
and they'd show us their piece of paper and what they, where they're getting the data they write down, and then who do they hand it to, and then we go talk to that person. It's like, what are you doing with this data? And then you'd find out, like, where does that ultimately end up, right? Mm-hmm. And it ended up in some database to generate some report, right?
Sure.
So we were creating software that kind of bridged ERP to the shop floor, right? So as I know you've heard me talk about several times, I mean, most ERP systems, opposite of ProShop, were generated in the finance or accounting department to gather the information they needed to look at job costs and all sorts of, financial data, but not necessarily designed to get parts out the door. Right.
Yep. Sure.
So we were on the side of like, how do we feed data to the ERP system to, provide good, valuable, like eliminate human error, those types of things. So we did a lot of things like barcodes. We did a lot of things like what today is very well known as machine monitoring, right? So we were tapping into PLCs on different types of machines, whether they were CNC machines or, like a rubber compound mixing machine, whatever.
Yeah, that's
and
super
we're pulling
cool.
weights and cycle times and, some of the just any sorts of data that we could get our hands on that would feed ultimately some sort of report that somebody needed.
You guys were ahead of your time. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, it was fun. I mean, it was kind of wild west in the technology space at the time. So if you think about it, from a technology evolution standpoint, this is late 90s, the late 1900s, early 2000s. You had the .com boom going on, and then the bust, and there was, and we were kind of flying under the radar of all that, but mobile was coming to fruition, and we were doing mobile data collection. So we, eventually we actually developed some Palm OS software. If
Palm
people
pilots.
Remember the Palm platform,
I had many of those.
That that really that's kind of what put us on the radar as a software developer, was actually the Palm environment, the Palm OS.
Mm-hmm.
So the quick little story on that is that Palm at the time, and I remember their executive team, when we met them, the way they framed it is they were trying to figure out how to come in the front door of corporations instead of the back door. So the back door was somebody got one for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bringing it in kind of unregulated, trying to figure out how to get their email and address book and all that stuff on their Palm.
Yeah.
They were trying to get corporations that want to buy thousands of these at a time to give to a mobile crew, right?
Sure.
So since we were doing some mobile development and shop floor collection, we worked pretty closely hand in hand with them to develop enterprise solutions that a company would say, okay, we need to buy 4,000 of these.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
we became a pretty big Palm developer. I think at one point we were like the third largest in the world.
Wow.
I exited that company in 2003 after a couple of rounds of investment that we had gone out and raised.
Yeah.
And then I kind of fell in love. So at that point in my career, I was, I don't know, early 30s. And I'd kind of fallen in love with two things, like the transaction and financial side of businesses.
Yep.
And manufacturing. So I spent the next 15 years of my career kind of more in the private equity world, small to medium sized private equity, not the Wall Street, level stuff, just more like real deals, right? Like the types of companies that we interface with every day.
Yeah.
And always had a passion for the ones that came across that were manufacturing. I touched all sorts of things, but the manufacturing were always just kind of especially interesting to me.
They're the best. And it's the best people.
Yeah. Well, it was the people, it was the and like the whole thing was just like, I don't know. They just always kind of stuck out to me as a little more fun than everything else. So between like 2015 and 2017, I was actually helping sell Hill Manufacturing that I now own.
Mm-hmm.
And, we'd gone through a couple of potential sell options for the previous owner. They didn't work out for, a couple of reasons. But the owner was just ready to be done really in 2017. It had been in business for 40 years at that point. She was, original founder. She was 68 years old, maybe at that time.
That's a long time working at a business.
And was just like, just find me something, right? Like otherwise she was going to, and we've all heard this story. We've talked about it on different shows. She was ready to just lock it up, auction off the equipment and go home. Right. So, which is an option in a capital intensive environment like this.
Yeah. But it's still pennies on the dollar compared to what you might get.
Yeah. But you could have still put a couple $1 million in your pocket.
Sure.
Right. Just selling equipment in the building and, you still could retire on it, but but you're giving up a lot.
Yeah.
So anyway, between myself and a couple of, trusted partners, we made an offer to buy the company. I was kind of ready for that last deal, if you will, for me that I was ready to like settle into and operate.
Yep.
So we purchased it in late 2017. I think our official date was like January of 2018, but,
okay.
And it was time to get to work. And so you talk about like your first exposure to making chips. Mine was sometime, probably within the first 30 days or so of owning Hill. I remember, I remember at the time hearing people talk about learning things from podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I wonder if there's any manufacturing podcasts. And I, Google search it or something. And at the time, the only one that came up for me was Making Chips. And I think I had to download something to my phone to be able to even listen to it. I didn't know
Sure.
what a podcast was at the time.
Yeah.
And it was, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere around like episode 90.
98.
And I don't remember what the first one was, but I remember listening to it and it's like, oh, that was good. So I listened to 89 and I listened to 88 and I just started listening backwards. Cause I think they were releasing every week and I'm thirsting for more and more information every hour by hour.
Yeah.
And, so I started listening backwards. I got all the way to number 1 and then you start going to like 92 and 93 and 94 and, but somewhere in there was like you
90,
were in
98. 98. Yeah.
You were? Okay. So sometime, I was going to say
sometime
in there.
It was August 24th, 2018. So it was just weeks before IMTS. Okay.
So that actually lines up perfect with where my mind was, which helps me think I'm not in the early stages of dementia. But I remember I had already decided I was not going to IMTS because I was not in the market for new machines. I had actually been to IMTS in 2020. When we were working with manufacturers, we were like, oh, we should go to the show.
Not 2020, 2012?
No, it was 2020. Like the first time I ever went.
You went in 2018 because you and I met.
I'm sorry, 2000. I went in 2000.
2000. Okay. The turn of the century.
What did I say? 2020?
The turn of the 19th century. The 20th century of the 1900s.
Yes.
To the year 2000s.
Yeah, so we had gone I think because Microsoft was maybe presenting there. We were Microsoft partner and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, it's just a bunch of machines. I'm not in the market for machines. Like, I don't need to go. Mm-hmm. I heard your episode.
Yep.
So I decided, okay, I'm going. And I actually remember I flew out of Tulsa on a 5 a.m. flight to arrive in Chicago at 7:30. The show opens at 9. The Making Chips was recording on the main stage.
Yep.
At like 10 or something. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go see those guys. And I go up there. I met Jim and Jason because I knew who they were. And I said, well, yeah, actually just flying in today to meet with this company called ProShop that I heard on your show. And I distinctly remember Jason going, oh, and like turn around, tapping you on the shoulder. you turn around like, this is Paul. I'm like, oh my gosh, I came here to meet you.
I remember that really well.
Yeah. And so anyway, I remember I watched them record live, and then I met you down in your booth, later that afternoon, and did a demo, and decided very quickly that ProShop was what I was looking for. I think a lot of the things you talked about and how you developed it is a lot of the reasons I chose it too, right? Like it was
just on the episode with Jim. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, a lot of things you just now talked about even, right?
Like, sure. I mean, yeah.
Because you were, back to what I said earlier, like you were designed to get parts out the door.
Absolutely.
And most ERP systems, from my experience, were designed for the finance department. I didn't need that. I needed to get parts out the door.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a highly sophisticated public company that needs crazy financial data. I'm integrating with QuickBooks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
sure.
That's all I needed. But what I needed was something to manage my shop. And, ProShop definitely did that. And they did it in an affordable manner with the SaaS model and all those types of things. But then that, of course, then led to, me being a fan of MakingChips and building relationships with you and Jason and Jim and then Nick, and just go down the list, right? Like here we are, 7 years later.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, but the interesting piece I left out of the Hill story, just as it relates to like ProShop and everything else. So we, Hill had a kind of similar journey to what you had when you had your shop. So at Hill, we weren't replacing what a lot of people replace, which is a completely paper based or maybe completely Excel based or something. My sister, again, my family's
from the area.
My dad was an MIS professor. Like we all kind of, we were all computer savvy. And my sister, the reason I even knew Hill and was helping sell it was going all the way back to my former brother-in-law, who's now my shop manager, worked for Hill as the shop manager back then.
Yep.
My sister, knowing something about computers, had developed what is affectionately called as the blue screen at Hill, because the screen was blue. It's real creative.
Don't confuse it with the Windows
database.
Don't confuse it with the Windows blue screen of death.
It was not. Yeah, it was not the Windows blue screen of death. It was a blue screen.
Yeah.
But it was an Access database ERP system, probably starting out with the same concept you had of, hey, you can automate some of these Excel spreadsheets and reports and all those types of things. Yeah. It never made it to the shop floor. It was always in the front office.
Okay.
So even like when we transitioned with you, we had some history on part level data, and there were routers, but those things got printed to go to the floor, just like you said. Yeah. Everything you saw at the time was. And so from a data migration standpoint, we did have some historical data to be able to pull and all those types of things. Mm-hmm. But it was, it had gotten to a point where it was funny, I remember early on after I'd bought Hill, and it's like, you wanted to pull something on a part level. You click the button, you walk away.
Oh, in the blue system?
Yeah, it was so bogged down with, at that point, roughly 20 years of data.
So she had built that 20 years prior to you.
It was in the 1900s. It had been developed a little bit since then, but so anyway, then my sister was not here. It was not at Hill anymore. That was just kind of back when,
sure.
Early 2000s or so. When, once she had kids, she had quit working here. And, but when we did our data migration, I actually had her come in for a weekend and help us export data, because she knew,
right,
the database structures better than anybody.
Sure.
To put all that into CSV files that we could then import into ProShop. And
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So that was, my background, if you just look at it in a summary, is, software, private equity, then into manufacturing. And I've never felt more at home in what I'm doing professionally than since I bought Hill and in manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, you've just like jumped, headfirst into the community, into learning, into leading, into, building connections, building friendships.
Well, I think you said it earlier. I mean, it's just the salt of the earth people, right? I mean, how can you not be enthusiastic about this industry?
That's when you get more people exposed to it.
Yeah. But go ahead.
So you had a pretty fast and pretty successful implementation of ProShop. And, sounds like the fact that you had this database system that your sister wrote was probably part of it. Like you already, conceptually at least, kind of things were in a database.
Sure.
But then we have many clients that switch from other ERPs, or they switch from just Excel or QuickBooks or nothing. But I think the biggest difference when I think across the ones that are just very fast and super smooth, it's alignment of the teams. It's just fully buying in, and humility. Like being open to a new way of thinking about things, because there's a lot of ways to solve a problem. And trying to make it, make it like your old system did it is probably not the best idea, because oftentimes that's why you are having troubles, because your old system does it.
Yeah, why are you looking for a new system if you want the old one, right?
Yeah. But what would you say was, why it went well that people could learn from?
I think there's a couple of things, and I've talked to some of your potential customers over the years, and like locally, someone, they know I'm a fan of ProShop, and they've reached out and asked like, hey, why do you like this or whatever? Some of the things I would say is, I mean, first of all, I love the fact that the system is built on getting parts out the door, right? I mean,
sure.
Hill's mission is to deliver quality parts on time every time. We've stuck with that since the day I bought the company, and it's the lowest hurdle in the world for a machine shop, but it's the hardest thing to achieve.
Right? I was going to say it's one of the hardest things to achieve, especially the on time and the quality.
But it's also what you better do, or someone will. Right? So
it's the lowest level of the bar you gotta hit.
Right. And so achieving that goal, I mean, you need support. And I remember, I distinctly remember, looking at the investment I was going to make in ProShop and say, is this, I mean, because it is an investment, sure, right? I mean, you need to know you're going to get ROI. Well, it was a real simple decision for me because, and I'd be honest with you, I don't even know what the per user per month fee is today, but I know at the time it aligned very closely with like a shop hour rate for me. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was able to look at that and say, okay, is it going to make me 1 hour more productive per person per month?
That was, I think I might have said that to you, because that's the way
you probably did
back when I was doing selling.
Yeah.
I was like, if you can make 1 hour a month, it'll pay for itself.
Right. And when you break it down to that simple of a level, yes. I mean, that you can't say no. Like there's not a logical reason that it wouldn't, right? So,
sure.
And what we found in a practical stance, on the shop floor, we're saving a couple hours a day per person.
Yeah.
Right. So your ROI there is hands down. Mm-hmm. We weren't, I'll be honest, we were not really considering what the front office time savings would be.
Right.
It almost didn't matter
because you already because you're focused on throughput on the shop floor.
Right. But I would tell you from a front office standpoint, I mean, you're talking probably saving 3 to 4 hours per day.
You told me back in whenever 2019 or that it was like 40, your leadership team, your office team saved like 40% of their time every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, hands down. this was not my intention, but this was the result. So if you think about the time frame, so I've bought a new company. I've inherited a bunch of people, a bunch of infrastructure, and on the management, like front office, accounting, like all those levels, we had dedicated people to kind of each job function, right? So whether it was purchasing, whether it's planning, scheduling, program, like go down the list. And I mean, definitely fast forward 6 or 7 years now, but even just a couple of years, all of those functions have become so much simpler through the use of a better system that, I mean, my management team's half the size it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it almost turned all of those into part-time jobs.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of like headcount reduction. So, but what it allowed us to do is repurpose.
Yeah. Into more value added roles.
Right. And into more roles and do a better job of those roles. And so I don't even know exactly how I would put a dollar value on that piece. Like I
suppose you could take the salaries of the people that moved into more value added roles. You freed up 3 people that make, I don't know, 50, 60, 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
And you don't need them in those roles anymore. That's
right. And they're doing other things that they, again, I wasn't doing it from a headcount reduction standpoint as much as an efficiency standpoint.
Sure.
And I mean, like our purchasing that used to be a full-time job and you'd be working overtime to get it done correctly, is a shared responsibility now. Like, because of the systems we have in place.
Yeah. I interviewed a customer, John Zamuda from Mosey's Production Machinist in Southern California on my other podcast, Manufacturing Transformed. And he said that they had a full-time purchaser who basically was pretty much chained to their desk all day, every day, cutting POs, getting quotes, cutting POs. And that person freed up so much time that they started going out and like meeting with vendors and doing more strategic sourcing and like upgrading their vendors and building relationships and like, because the actual tactical part of issuing POs and getting quotes and just like became a fraction of the time.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, I mean, from a purchasing perspective, that's exactly the same thing we experienced. So we had a very, administrative data entry purchasing role prior to ProShop.
Right.
That part of the day became a 20-minute exercise, maybe an hour on a big day. Mm-hmm. That became a role where now I need a procurement professional it's really more about vendor management, vendor relationships, strategic buying, being able to analyze whether or not we need a mill run of something versus just, I mean, I still laugh that, I mean, it just drives me crazy to think about this, but, for the first year I owned Hill, like if we got a repeat job from a customer, which at the time was probably 85, 90% of the work that we did, we would go down to the file room and we'd pull the file from the last time we ran that job. And we would just copy and paste the last purchase order for buying that material, buying, any BOM items, anything.
Mm-hmm. Right.
From the last time, price and all.
Right.
Right. So
which your vendor probably hated. They're like,
or loved.
Or loved. Yeah. Or loved, depending.
Because I can tell you this much, we only got price increases from the last time, right? Like no one, if we sent it to them at $100 each, because that's what we paid last time, they never came back and said, oh, it's only 90 this time.
Sure.
But they would come back and tell us it's 110.
Of course.
Right. So, I mean, we were just, there was no structure or system or process in place to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. It was just to process the work.
Right.
And, it changed that role in the realm of purchasing to more of a strategic position that can, I guess it's probably not the right way to say it, like can make you money, but it can be a cost savings center now rather than just an administrative function that somebody copy and pasted the last purchase order.
Yeah.
Right. And then go down the line. Right. So whether that's purchasing, whether that was in the accounting functions, whether that was, I mean, just again, it does. I mean, you can go down the line.
Even accounting based systems that are quite competent and good at that side of the business still traditionally have people using spreadsheets all day long.
Sure.
Right. I know, when we've had clients coming from, a more sort of legacy accounting based system, they got spreadsheets out the wazoo every which way, right? Because they're just exporting and slicing and dicing, and procurement is often a part of that, or scheduling or whatever, and then bringing stuff back in, and because they're not designed.
And we'll still fight that today sometimes. Like, I mean, we'll be sitting in a management meeting or something, and someone says, "Hold on, let me pull up this spreadsheet that I created." And I'm like, I mean, my antennas immediately go up, right? Like, what are we getting ready to look at? And I'll let them show me. And then I'm like, okay, well, why aren't we doing this in a more automated, like shared function than like your spreadsheet on your desktop, right?
Totally.
And then we have to work through that. And we have to go, oh, yeah, you're right. We could keep track of that in this, we could use these functions and we could do these things. But I think it's probably just a little bit of human nature. I mean, if like I'm actually really good at Excel, right? So, I kind of make the joke sometimes. My dad wrote the book on Excel. Well, he actually did. Remember I said he was a college professor in MIS.
Yeah,
I mean, he actually wrote a book on Excel.
That's funny.
And so I've known it since as a matter of fact, I knew how to do spreadsheets before Excel. I used Lotus 1-2-3 way back in their 1900s. And so I mean, I can default to that too, right? Like I can be like, oh, here, let me just create a spreadsheet that does this. But that's not scalable, right?
Sure.
So like what I'm okay with my team is like, okay, that's fine. You can start with that, but we need to systemize that, right? So whether it's, and 9 times out of 10, I mean, in all reality, we find that we can handle it like what we're doing in ProShop.
Yeah. Figure out a query or dashboard.
There are some instances where it's like, okay, yeah, this is a good standalone, like, but let's get it on Teams and, share it on OneNote where we can, this is something that we all have shared access to or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, if I look at, what we've done at Hill in the time that I've owned it, so it's been a little over 7 years.
You've added like 3 or 4 more shops to it as well since then.
So we acquired 4 more shops since Hill. Of course, we've migrated everything to ProShop. We have 2 different installs of ProShop because we have different ownership structures and so forth. But we, the ability to standardize across all of those shops and all that has just been critical. But if you just look at it from a pure growth standpoint, we're I don't know, probably 250% growth from the time we bought it to now.
That's good growth. Yeah.
And would I have been able to do that without a ProShop system in place? Absolutely freaking not. Like there's not a chance in the world that
would
that
you
I
just
would have
have
understood.
more people, or you just couldn't have grown?
Well, I mean, from a processing and throughput standpoint, like the systems and the processes we had in place wouldn't have supported it. I couldn't have transitioned the blue screen to all these new shops, right? Like, I mean, just that alone,
sure,
would not have been sustainable to support the growth that we were achieving. I mean, just overall, well, the best way I can put it is, I mean, I understand how to run a business really well. Been doing it for 25 years, from an accounting and finance and leadership and all those types of things. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good,
Yeah.
for the size of business that I'm in. But I didn't know how to run a shop.
Right.
And I thought, and I had a lot of people that thought they knew how to run a shop. I will say that too. But where I finally kind of had the breakthrough, like once we had ProShop and I was seeing, okay, this is how you really do it.
Right.
I essentially, so for me, it was a master class in how to run a shop. And where I finally kind of got my breakthrough with my management team is when, if they were not going to just follow the standard operating procedure that is built into ProShop, they had to come prove to me why their method was better.
I like that. A good concept.
Then all of a sudden, everybody accepted best practices that were built into ProShop. And we literally scaled at that point, with no looking back. We fought it enough because it's not the way we've done it, right? It's not how Hill does this. It's not how, but when they finally understood that it's not the way Hill's done it, the Hill hadn't done it correctly.
Right. But they didn't know any different. They thought the way they did it was the correct way.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad way. I mean, I mean, Hill's been a great company for almost 50 years.
Yeah, no doubt.
And at the time, 40 years, right? Whatever. But the reality is there was better ways to do things. And ProShop brought that to us in a very systematic way. And my only exceptions I would allow as kind of like the champion for, because I will say, I think that's one thing I've told everybody that's even thought about ProShop is, and this extends well beyond ProShop. This is any sort of system change. You got to have a champion, right? And the higher up in the food chain that champion is, the better, right? So in my case, the owner saying, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it, that's the best case, right?
Sure.
But, so if anybody wanted to do things outside of the system and them have to prove to me they had a better method, 99 times out of 100, it never got to me, because once they flushed that out to prove it to me, they realized their way was not better. Right.
As you said, that is such a brilliant way to think about any major system change.
It's
right.
Yeah. Whether it's ProShop or anything else. I mean, just prove to me
the old way is
way.
better. Yeah. Well, as I said, earlier on when I was talking, the companies that are the best at it are the most humble and the most open to looking at their ways, with a critical eye and saying, yeah, is this the way we want to keep doing it? Is there a better way? And not fighting it. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I've told people this before, and it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I guess it could reflect somewhat negatively on me. I don't know. And again, this is just change in general, but I'm using ProShop as an example. When we made that decision to make that change, and I think you indicated, you had alluded to earlier, we were like super quick. So I saw the demo at, in mid-September at IMTS. We were in training by, I think, the first week of October. We were running parallel with our old system in December, and we were launched live in December. It's pretty quick.
That's for a 40-person shop. That's lightning fast.
But I was convinced enough. I'm like, no, we're doing this, right? Like it made for some long days. I will admit that. I mean, we were doing our training at 6:00 night local time, and then doing our homework after that, right? Like doing our test case estimating or whatever. But it was important and it was critical and we did it. But that change on the shop floor, once we went to the shop floor, they accepted it like literally within days, right? So we're changing the way we're clocking in. We're changing the way we're recording our time against jobs. We're changing the way we're recording quality records and all this stuff. I mean, it literally was within the first week. We pretty much had everybody on board and scheduled and working. There were, of course, hiccups and, somebody forgot to clock in or, whatever. Of
course.
But everybody was on board. The biggest hurdle I had, and again, I think if you just go back to, change management in general, was really more in the front office, right? So it was the purchasing, the accounting, the planning, the scheduling, that we're like, well, that's not how I've always done it. And, I could have said this same statement 3 years ago. None of those people are still here. I don't like, that wasn't the goal.
Sure.
Right. But it became standard and clear enough that we had made the right change. If you can't get on board with the direction we're heading, then, there's going to be, we're not the right place for you and you're not the right, person for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And so those changes did happen really within the first probably 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've brought new people in to replace those roles, they see immediately, like in the first day, that we're doing things the right way. And they love the simplicity of how we're doing it and the ease at which, I keep going back to purchasing, but that is such a simple process now that when we made a replacement in purchasing a few years ago, this was someone that was doing purchasing at a Fortune 500 company. And we bring them into purchasing and they're like, oh my God, I wish I had this at my old place, right?
Sure.
This is so easy.
Right.
It then allowed that person to focus more on the vendor management side, be more strategic, buy smarter.
Yeah.
Work on things that are, could be mill run. We really, so we made the job easier, but then it allowed us to double down on that. And, then also reduce costs, right? So not only make it more efficient, but reduce the commodity price of 1018 steel or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's even hard to discuss that in the sales cycle. People don't realize how much inherent waste there is in older systems or paper-based systems, that when you free that up, it's like a multiplier effect on improving so many other things.
Well, yeah, because it would be, honestly, even having lived through it, it would be really hard to put a number on it.
Right.
Right. So, I can see from a selling standpoint, it'd be very hard to.
Well, we try, we have an ROI calculator and on our website, and, we built it based on feedback from customers and anecdotes of what they shared, where we do have all these different things, like how many hours do you spend on setups? How much do you spend at scrap? How much do you spend in expedite fees and overnight shipping charges on an annual basis?
That's true.
And if you track all those things, and then you plug all the numbers in, because the typical sort of increases in throughput that we get reported to us, assuming you have positive sales pressure. You got customers wanting to place orders and they'll take them sooner. Without a single new spindle or a single additional person on the floor, they're seeing 25% more throughput.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's,
which I can,
and that's massive.
That's huge. You can't put
so in a typical year, that's 500 work hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
of a
overtime year.
Person. Yeah. Of a person.
That's
so
500 hours.
If
so
you're
then what's the value of $5 million?
Yeah. If you're, easy numbers. If you're a $10 million shop, you could be a $12 million shop the next year without a single additional person. And very likely some folks in the office are going to free up. In fact, I had a bet with a customer. He's been on both podcasts, James Marzilli. He had like, in fact, we did a webinar. He called it the ass to seat ratio. So like, how many seats in the office does he have, or asses in those seats versus his shop staff? Right. And I think at the time he had like 5 people in the office and 15 in the shop, right? 20 people total. And he's like, there's no way you're getting those 5 people down to be less than 5. Like, they are so lean, so efficient.
Sure.
Like, it's like the most bare bones crew you can get. And sure enough, within like 6 months or a year, he's like, Paul, we only need 4 people in the office, and we're now doing, it's like they grew 70% or something that year. And
well, I'll give you hopefully I'll give you a similar scenario for us. So look at so it was late 2018 that we engaged with ProShop. It was 2019 we rolled it out. What happened in 2020?
COVID.
Our world was turned upside down, right? We were down 60% in 2020 in revenue. We did late 2020. I think we laid off like 5 people or something. I mean, it wasn't massive, but it was, we did have to lay off a few.
It's hard.
But we were, I'll say at the time we were, so what we did in 2020 is we committed as hard as we could to work on ourselves. Right. So we reinvested about $500,000 that year just in ourselves. And that was through not laying people off. That was through working on work holding and fixturing. But a large part of that too was working on getting ProShop where we really wanted it. Okay. So we're down 60% in 2020. 2021, we rebound, and we rebound hard. So we were double in 21, we were more than double in revenue what we were in 2020. Okay. So we were over 2019. 2020 was down. 2021 would have been probably 20-25% growth over 2019.
Wow. That's huge.
And we ultimately did it with about 15% less headcount.
Total across the whole company,
Across the whole company. We were again, say 25% increased revenue with, we went from probably mid 40s to mid 30s in employees. So what is that? Another 25% roughly. A little bit more than that, closer to 30%. So we did 25% more revenue with 30% less people. Because we doubled down and got our systems and our processes and our people in place.
It is such an important lesson for everyone to know, regardless of what the systems are, just making them really as efficient as you can.
That's why you do that investment, right? Like that's why you work on those things. And there were days in 2020, I had 3 people like with a scrub brush and a bucket scrubbing the walls. Literally, because it had 15 years of machine shop grime on them.
Yeah, sure.
Which I think probably everybody listening can appreciate.
Oh, for sure.
But we reinvested in ourselves that year, and we came out, meaner, faster, stronger, bigger, better, everything. And it was the double down we did on our systems, our processes, our people. Right. And
that's awesome.
And quite frankly, as we've now still grown another, probably, I guess, doubled since then, probably, our head count has probably only increased 30-40%. Right. So we're just leaner, faster, stronger than we've ever been by investing in the right, processes and systems and people.
Well, maybe as we should start wrapping up here, the same exact, when we put ProShop into that very first machine shop customer of ours, that guy you met, Rich, they were like a $6 million company when they put ProShop in, and they had 35 people. Okay. They're an OEM. So they're not a job shop, but they're an OEM that makes aerospace hardware. So some of the numbers might be different. Like five years later, they were a $16 million company.
Holy smokes.
And they had 40 people, 5 more people.
5 more people and 2.5 times the revenue.
Yeah. And he said, at least just in the office alone, probably need 10 more bodies if they weren't using ProShop. If they were using their old ERP.
I'd believe that.
10 more overhead staff.
Yeah.
It was, and so through all those years, we're really onto something. I think we need to bring this to the market because all these shops like yours, the bedrock of our economy, they got to have better systems than what's out there today. And the thing that I just love, and maybe this is the final wrap up, and a credit to Kelsey, my partner. Like Kelsey and Matt together collectively, but we were at this event last night, and it's like ProShop is Kelsey. Like the ideas, the way the data flows between modules, the way that it all was conceived of originally, that was Kelsey's brainchild. And now there's hundreds of shops around the country having results like yours because of Kelsey's ideas.
That's cool.
And I feel blessed to be able to bring that to the market and share that with people and share that with owners like you that go out and grow and hire people and build our economy. And it's,
that's awesome.
I got to pinch myself, some days.
Yeah. Kelsey, I know, and, obviously you're out in front of the market more than most people, but, I've got to spend some time with Kelsey, and he's pretty great.
I've been side by side with him since 1993, way back in the 1900s.
Way back in the 1900s.
When we got paired up as lab partners in our very first day of college together.
Isn't that wild?
I love it.
That's cool.
Anyway, thank you to Kelsey for the efficiencies that he's helping bring the metalworking industry.
Yeah, Kelsey, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been quite a sort of fun, memory lane kind of thing. And
hopefully people understand us a little bit better now.
Yeah. And I think some of the principles you shared about investment in the company and systems, and I hope they take that to heart and bring that to their own companies, because it is one of the most fundamentally important things you can do to a business to help it be more profitable, grow, be a windfall for the shareholders, and hopefully build that legacy that can live on forever and not just go to auction, sell off assets.
Yeah. Well, and, thank you to you and Kelsey and your whole team. I mean, honestly, I don't really want to envision where I'd be without having, good systems in place, and ProShop being one of those that, I've got a great team. I've got a lot of things, but, having the system to back all that up makes it super powerful.
Well, it's an honor.
Yeah.
So thank you, my friend. Have a good rest of your day.
Well, we'll keep making chips, because if you're not making chips, you're not making money. Bam.